Ladies and gentlemen, just to say hello, just to say welcome to this discussion, which is initiated by PS.ARCHIVE from Parasite. I'm very grateful to involve us in this important discussion. Maybe if you take a look to the walls, maybe it's just the right inspiration for a discussion like that. It's on photography, and photography has a lot to do with the market of art. And just one remark, please. These are not posters, these are original photos, so I would like to ask the people who stand on the back row, don't lean on it because it looks like posters, but it's not, it's photographs underneath. Okay. Thanks, Tobias. It's for you.
Yeah, hello everybody. It's always a pleasure to see so many known and unknown faces. It seems there's a certain interest in that art market, that topic. We initiated that discussion because we have an exhibition at the moment at Parasite Art Space, which is called Free New Zealand Art. In that exhibition, we actually give art away for free. I made that exhibition also a year ago in New Zealand because there was a lot of talk about the art market, and there was art was only be judged because of the price it has. And we, oh, that's Johnson. We as independent institutions are certainly responsible to show art a little bit differently, show art that is that we judge on other terms than the art market. On the other side, I believe that it is very important to have an active art market and to have a healthy environment for artists, so artists can sustain themselves, artists can live actually from their sales, and that we are basically in that boat together. And because artists need also money to survive, and it's also some way to live besides always doing some odd jobs and sometimes wasting their time on building sites or other things, spending money. So I also think that a lot of galleries do a lot of good, really good job finding new artists, developing new artists, and working with the artists. And I therefore think it is a good time now to talk about the art market, especially when we see that at the auction houses the Chinese art market is basically exploding. We hear amazing prices for some amazing artworks and for some artworks which maybe some people don't like that much at the moment. So it is also a good time to get a few people together here in Hong Kong, where we have a very small gallery market on the opposite besides two big auction houses, and to see what individual people and individual activists in that art market are doing. This is a rather big table, I have to admit. I'm really happy that I have so many interesting people on that table, but I also know that there are a lot of people sitting in the audience who could sit on that table as well and talk about it. I see a lot of good gallerists, I see a lot of good other practitioners, and I'm quite happy about that, certainly. I think we now, I have a few questions lined up. I will introduce shortly the participants, and then we do these few questions like for 45 minutes, an hour, and then I will open it certainly for questions which I'm sure you all have. Maybe just to introduce each of us. On my right, on your left is Caroline Chu. She's an artist. She's also collected on her here. She recently had a show art gallery, and she just installed a show yesterday music. On that, on my right is Henry, is the director of Photo Art, established in 2001. And interesting here because he's basically specializing on pure Hong Kong art and on very young art mostly, and that's more or less the address in Langquai. But for art, but that really always puts on good shows, good exhibitions. And also, I'm sure you all have this gallery regularly.
in front.
On the left beside me, Charles. Charles is everybody talks about him, I have to admit, and nobody has ever seen him. And I was he came in today. I'm sure the galleries have seen him. He has apparently a legendary collection and is at home both in Hong Kong and internationally. So. In the business probably longer than 1983, but Hannah opened in 1983. It's basically the most art gallery for Chinese art in Hong Kong, I would say, and also for Taiwanese art and some international art. But Johnson also wrote a lot of articles as well as curated major survey shows about Chinese art overseas, and is also therefore basically responsible that people like me in Germany or in Europe saw quite nice or very good Chinese art very early. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming. Maybe I ask Henry first, how would you define the contemporary art market in Hong Kong? Or what does this contemporary art market actually, yeah, what is that in Hong Kong and how does it play?
Well, first of all, I think there's a pretty big group of contemporary artists working in Hong Kong, especially local ones. I think over the years there has been only maybe a handful of galleries, Johnson one, that carry local Hong Kong artists. Well, I think really the representation was totally under what could have been done. So I think there's an active art scene, a lot of people producing. But in terms of markets, it's still relatively small because one, there's not enough agents, there's not enough galleries carrying local Hong Kong artists. Secondly, I think even the big auction houses represent very, very little Hong Kong artists. So again, I think there's plenty of supply. Just needs to have a little bit, more agents, and I mean the clients are there as well. I think they are interested, otherwise I won't be surviving. But I think we just need to have more representation, building the bridges, between the clients and the artists.
Caroline, for you as both an artist and a client, how could we do this? What are these bridges, or how do the galleries actually reach out and get these bridges? Are the galleries the ones that build the bridges, or are the artists actually in Hong Kong the ones that sometimes build the bridges?
Well, I can only really speak for myself, and I think each artist really has to find their own way. They have to find their own style, they have to find their own medium, they have to find their own gallery and like-minded people and like-minded collectors. But I think perhaps the other thing just happening with Hong Kong artists is the fact that such spectacular rises in prices have more to do with world and big macroeconomic factors. I mean, for instance, we all talk about this, the rise in wealth in China, and that's fueling a huge art market in China. And we always sort of compare ourselves with poor cousins, in Hong Kong, and say, how come Hong Kong artists can't get these prices? How come Chinese artists have quadrupled or gone up value by 380%? How come Hong Kong artists don't? And I think it's really a matter of time matter of developing that market. So I think that, people just have to make their art, kind of be patient, because what's been going on in China has been developing slowly and probably over 20 years. It hasn't been an overnight sensation, which I think the press and media like to say that it is. And I think that it's just really something that will come to Hong Kong. And as there are more interests in Hong Kong, it's just a matter of, I guess, sticking with it.
So Johnson, is Hong Kong art undervalued compared to Chinese art?
I certainly think so. But value is relative.
Yeah.
If you buy something which is of very great intrinsic value, but it never goes up into the secondary market, it's very discouraging. But collecting art, I find that you need something. It is not just. It is nothing that has nothing to do with need. So I think people buy art because there's some magic in it. For a long time, before the Chinese art market became what it is today, before the secondary market ever started to think about contemporary art, people already started to collect contemporary Chinese art from overseas, and there were a few dedicated collectors in Hong Kong. And I think part of that reason is that because there was intrigue in it. People feel that they are seeing something which others have not seen. There is something intriguing. There's something. It's like a big shared secret between the people who collect. And if this is a way, if this is how collectors go about the search, perhaps we can devise some strategies for contemporary art in Hong Kong as well. Again, if we take mainland Chinese art as an example, people find before, when it was not easy to access artists, for people from overseas, it was a great thrill to find an art gallery, because I was the only person at that time handling several artists. Now people find that it's a great thrill to be taken on these tours to visit artist studios, and suddenly people feel that they are entering into a magic of a whole dimension of culture, which is totally different from what they see on the street. And I'm sure that can be engineered for Hong Kong art, especially now that people, and thanks to a huge crash in property market a few years ago, unfortunately it's gone back up again, now artists have studios. 10 years ago, if somebody wanted to see Hong Kong art, if it is not in the gallery, there's actually nowhere to see it. You cannot take people to people's flats, 800 square feet with artists living with their parents and their brothers and their sisters. But now, you can take them to Fort Han, you can take them to these other places. So perhaps one way of opening up that crack in the door to let in some of that magic is, for example, these studio visits. Somehow you engineer a somehow you create a possibility for people to feel that they are seeing an exclusive view, exclusive aspect of a city. I think that's perhaps one strategy.
And in Chad.
And B, because I think with the enormous volume of China's history,
part of the reason for that is that what everybody's been discussing today. So I really can't talk to you about Chinese artists. My mother's a Hong Kong artist, so I have a sort of view on that. But again, I don't know very much about her art, frankly
She's got a
speaking.
magical studio.
She's got a magical studio, which I'm now living in. But on the Western art scene, again, the collection of art, the gallery infrastructure, the artists have really been going non-stop since the Medici period, and that's why you have periods like the Impressionists. That's why they get collected. I was reading a fascinating article recently about how syndicates of collectors started at the turn of the 1900s, the turn of the 20th century, and how they sort of got into the art market and out of it. And I thought it was rather interesting that people were forming syndicates, like some people are doing today, and it's been going on for actually a very long time. So in terms of how Chinese art will develop, and I think our friends from Christie's will have a view on this, I think there's everything to be done in that space. I think some of the young artists you're seeing today, particularly the ones perhaps who were born after 1975 and therefore didn't know of Mao and viewed him and that era a bit differently, I think that's going to be a very fascinating period, and I don't know what people like Christie's think of it. But we're right at the beginning of an era, and there'll be a few bumps in the road, as I've mentioned.
Sure. Before we come to Christie, but then especially because, as you mentioned, there was this huge gap in Chinese art. But how, in Hong Kong, did we have the same gap? This is really a question. How did it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, Johnson can sort of answer the history of Hong Kong artists probably better than I can, even though my mother has been painting here since 1963. But it's a very small space you're talking about in Hong Kong, among Hong Kong collectors of Hong Kong art. Quite a lot of the corporates have been collecting for some time. And I don't think you've had the same break, but it's been a much smaller art environment. And I think, having this group of people here tonight is quite impressive, actually. I think if we'd sat down and had this 40 years ago, you'd have a pro-rata number of people back 40 years, so divided by 40. That would be my guess.
So we are developing in the right direction.
I think it can't get smaller, can it? You've filled up the Goethe Institute.
Good. Yeah. Is there a bubble? The big question you probably get asked every day.
Yes, sort of. But you have to look back, just like everybody's saying, like the Chinese contemporary doesn't turn out overnight. It has been a process and time to go, that market to go like to the stage. And as everybody would know, like Chinese contemporary art has never been so strong and so widely accepted or recognized ever, or even Chinese art. So for the market side, because actually auction is the secondary market rather than the gallery or agents. They were the frontier of the market. As the auction, and we were taking the next step after the gallery and agents. We promote another platform for all the artists to participate in a sale, which actually auction serve the function as indicator of the market. So the market result, like you saw today, actually shows how strong interest is from globally.
But aren't you? Also putting yourself a bit innocently there. Sotheby's and Christie's also pushed. There is a long price. There is a strong demand, right? But they also. I myself had the experience that Sotheby's. That a lot of people think everything that is sold by Sotheby's and Christie's is fabulous and has the seal of approval of whatever.
But that's part of the magic you were
yes,
talking about.
Auction,
that is the magic. Whether you get a commissioned artist or whether you go to Christie's, that's the magic.
There's a person.
Very difficult to hear you.
Oh.
Use your mic.
Is that better?
Yeah, okay. Okay, let me use Sorry. Thanks for that.
it.
You have to pass it.
But you can also work with flying, right? So
Oh, that's better. Yeah.
Yes.
Hello. Oh, good. Yeah, that's even better. But how do you keep? I mean, how do you keep informed? Like you live in Hong Kong, right? How?
Yes.
I mean, my question is always, how do you keep up with the market? How do you know what's in or out, or don't you maybe have to know that? I mean, how do you know what is interesting, what's not interesting at the moment?
What do you mean by?
I mean, you certainly do. You don't take everything
Yes.
that is offered to you, I guess. So how do you make the selection of artists you present in Hong Kong, in London, and how's that
Because
selection process working?
Actually, the auction in different regions shows a different taste and interest. Different, like saying Chinese contemporary art, actually will show different results eventually, the taste.
Yeah.
So in New York, London, or Asia. So it's really not absolute standard or guideline to fitting everything. So it will be depending on what's the region's interest and taste. For Asia particularly, because we have a long history of, the tradition. So we basically, people who come to Asia early time, and people who live in Asia, they have much more, deep knowledge or understanding of the Asian culture, or particularly Chinese. So when they're looking at Chinese contemporary art, they would know what's the background or what's the concept or story behind. They could be very easy to associate what's the artist's idea or concept trying to express with the work. So the auction in Asia actually would be, as I see now today, is actually the primary market for all the Asian contemporary art, not only including Chinese, but also like Japanese, Korean, or China, or Taiwan, or Hong Kong, or even Southeast Asia. It actually will become more pan-regions market rather than individual regions in the future.
So it will become more one.
Definitely. Just like London or New York, they are not only sell like New York, they were actually including the North American or South American regions, or Europe. Yes.
So how does that make you feel then how do you feel about something like that you now certainly don't have to provide for the Hong Kong market anymore, but now you're a global player?
Yeah. Well, that's one thing that I try not to do. I think in a gallery, quite opposite from what the auction house is doing.
It's okay.
What we are trying to do, I think, is to single out Hong Kong. Because I think the Hong Kong market is different, the Hong Kong artists are different, the collector's taste is different. And for I think the Hong Kong market to stand alone and to grow and develop, it has to be taken separately, different away from the mainland, even the mainland Chinese market, because Hong Kong has a different history. The development is different. The collector's taste is different.
Exactly.
So I think while they try to globalize the market, the Pan-Asian region, I think probably I think us, the gallery, I will try to really I think keep it more individual.
Can you define this individualism more, or what makes that market so a little bit different than the bigger market?
Well, I think the Hong Kong, well, first of all, the Hong Kong art market, the Hong Kong art itself is different. It's a lot more, I think, non-political than a lot of regional art. And also, I think Hong Kong artists tend to focus on more personal issues and quite, I think, different. I mean, not as influenced, out from outside issues comparing to, for example, mainland or Taiwanese artists. So I think the local collectors, they look for something that is very personal. Yet I think they might be, you have 10 Hong Kong artists, they could be doing 10 different things. It's hard to find an umbrella to group them together, to find a trend. And that's why it's so difficult, I think, to promote Hong Kong artists, because they're so different. Unlike, for example, mainland artists, like the Post-89 group, for example, Johnson was doing, a lot of them can be grouped together and promote as a whole. I think that was the best strategy at the time, and it worked. I think people responded to that. While they can individually find different craftsmanship, different concept, and different personal sentiment to the work, they have one singular, I think, overall political umbrella. I think that was very important. Hong Kong artists, they don't have that. I don't think they have that. Not, through the 60s, 70s, even after 1997, the political issue was very minimal to their creation.
Oh yeah.
Can I just say something? I mean, as an artist and as a collector also, we're talking about the art market. And it's just sort of occurred to me sitting here that one of the things we're also talking about is these spectacular prices. And one way that we are all impressed with spectacular prices is when works of art sell for really amazing prices. And I mean, as a collector and someone that's sort of seen things go, happen, one sort of knows that that support for those prices sometimes is created. It can be created by one person who's trying to promote a lot of art. I won't say necessarily a gallery, but it could be a business person who's bought 30 paintings by a certain artist, and so puts a painting in an auction and then bids up that price so that there's a benchmark, a public record for that price. And I mean, in a similar way, if we're talking about Hong Kong art market, in a way that's something else that could happen for Hong Kong artists. If there was a benchmark for artists that happened in a very spectacular way, then people would start talking about that. The media would pick up on that. So I just, we're just kind of talking about money, so I just wanted to throw it out there.
But does that, asking for Christie's, does that actually work in the long run? People always talk about this fantasy. I don't know if it's a fantasy. Probably it is reality, and a lot of these prices actually indicate it is reality for certain paintings. But can you, on the long run, keep actually a price or an artist spectacular or expensive or in the media by talking up a price?
I think everybody has to know the auction rank will not treat as every piece of the artist ever created. So even the piece which achieving high price the auction, it doesn't mean the price for that particular artist is not skyrocketing, So the auction sometimes could be also attract attention. But in other way, as a photo collector, I will always suggest collector to be more, reasonable and fair to look at in every aspect of the artist and the market and also the environment. Because actually, the price achieved in auction is not only controlled by someone or any other person or in the market. It has to be everybody's effort. From education, the artist's concept, the work qualities, market, museum, critics, everybody's effort to create the healthy environment to booming the market. So that's the market you see in today. It's not like Christie or Sotheby could create a market in just like this. It's almost impossible. It's actually so...
Would you like me to add something to that? I think just while we're on this point, for those who don't know, you might be interested in a few basic sort of guidelines. There's a book called Colours, which describes Christie's and Sotheby's, and there are other auction houses around Bonhams and Dupuy and several others who deal in these secondary markets. But the book Colours, which was written anonymously by a former Christie's or Sotheby's, one of the two.
Yes.
It's a very interesting book about the auction houses and how they operate. I think the second thing people should remember is when you want to buy a piece of art, you should keep in mind that the transaction costs are very, very high. So this is not a commodity. It's not like buying a stock or a share. So here we are all happily talking about the price of things in the market and so on. This is really illiquid stuff. And buying a painting is really easy. Selling one, this is a slightly different story. So, you might want to keep that in mind when you putter around in your galleries. I think the third thing to remember is you've got to sit and watch it on your wall most of your time. So you've got to like the thing too.
So how do you select them?
And I think that's really sort of left out of this conversation a bit, and,
No,
and it's quite important.
Yeah.
If you keep buying things that are reasonably priced and that you like, you might actually end up enjoying the collection one day.
Yeah, that's actually my the main question. How do you the question about selecting and the question about choice. I mean, there's, as Henry said, we have really good artists in Hong Kong, and we have a great potential of artists in Hong Kong. And I think I know from our auctions and other auctions we do to survive that there's a lot of works there which people really enjoy, and they are really not very expensive. But how do you? I mean, the interesting thing is that we all six sitting here, have a very different way of choosing and selecting artworks. And I mean, maybe I'll start with Johnson and then we go on. I mean, how do you actually, I mean, I know also you have a great personal collection, but for your gallery, how is it just gut feeling of I want to represent that artist, or how do you here in Hong Kong select artists and make that decision?
Well, I think it's always gut feeling.
Yeah.
It's really very. Hello. It's really a reflection of the appetite of each gallerist or promoter or critic even. And if you have a very big appetite, you have a very if you have a very broad taste, then you do a much wider range of things. So and in Hong Kong, I mean, everybody go out to, we go to Lebanese food, we go out for Thai restaurants, we go to French restaurants. And this is really the place to have a taste of different types of art. So the selection of art, I think, is there. But then, of course, the most exciting thing is finding things which are exciting and which are recognized by others, and which eventually get recognized as a benchmark in certain aspects of the culture of the place. Henry was just saying that the promotion of Hong Kong artists, of Hong Kong art in general, is difficult because you cannot easily give make a blanket statement about Hong Kong art. Not like in China, where the politics is so is such an issue that people can easily speak about Chinese art in terms of politics. But I think we all should also remember that each artist makes their work individually, and the fact that they get grouped together is because of curatorial efforts, because of interpretations by critics and curators. So it is the fact that we recognize artists as groups was because it has been slowly built up through, also in a way, an interpretive and creative effort. Certainly, I think Hong Kong artists share many common features, and these features are totally different from artists in China. And I do agree with Henry's point that once you actually bring these artists together so that their strengths help each other, and the sum total is much bigger than just adding them up individually. And perhaps one of the strategies for Hong Kong artists is really to try to interpret them and to see them as part of bigger picture, as part of culture of Hong Kong.
Google art.
well, that's one way of putting it. Yes, why not?
Again, still trying to get to grips with this idea about Hong Kong art, but are there actually ways? I mean, there are certain things which are very particular in Hong Kong, like this idea of, hey, we have to bring art into the shopping malls, and we get all these shopping malls exhibitions at the moment. Unfortunately, Dominic is not here yet. He's doing some of them, but maybe it's also, no, he's not. But is that actually, I mean, for an artist, is that an environment you really want to be in a shopping mall, or
Not for me, no. No.
You're not for you. I mean, maybe.
No, I don't want to be in a shopping mall.
But I think you've come across a. I mean, I think this is an interesting point. Sorry, I'm thinking.
Go ahead.
Just trying to help stimulate them. You know, Hong Kong's culture. Part of Hong Kong's culture is shopping. We are the shopping capital of the world. It's the one great claim to fame we still can all agree on. So, you know, in a sense, if you like, our shopping malls are the equivalent of cathedrals in Europe in the Dark Ages, or temples in China in the 2nd century, or whatever you want. So it's the sort of backdrop, and obviously the owners of the shopping malls have their own reasons for promoting art, although now West Kowloon's sort of gone quiet, it's probably less interesting to them. But nevertheless, the idea is to bring people in. And I think Caroline is right in a sense. I mean, of course, if you're an artist, you probably want something a little bit more specialized or more focused, or you want a gallery to promote you actively. But the fact is that, you know, as I mentioned, there are so many people here tonight. Art and the collection of art and the interest in art and the interest in artists and in galleries and all this layering. If it has to include shopping malls, well, so be it. I mean, you know, why not? It's not the end of the world, I think. What do you think?
No, I agree with Charles. I think, in fact, you know, a lot of my artists that I represent, you know, when they began their career, you know, they didn't have a gallery to represent them. So that's all they got. You know, either you go to the Fringe, you pay some money to go somewhere, or if you're fresh grad, you probably don't have the money. So I think they're just so desperate, you know, seeking for any space to show. And also, I think some shopping mall, it depends on which shopping mall. Like, for example, the Swai, Pacific Place, Taikoo Place, I mean, those are, you know, I think better space than some of the more, I think, you know, different, I think, shopping malls. So I think, you know, it could be just another step. I think it provides an opportunity to display their work. And I think for young artists, for example, they learn how to work with another agent or work with a corporation. So they have, you know, they can gain some experience in dealing with the business world. So I think on and off, you know, that might not be a bad idea. But of course, you have the choice, then you want to have a specialized gallery.
We're talking about shopping, and I was just reviewing a show this morning where Shanghai Tang and Shoney Art Gallery have gotten together and done a limited series of art editions. So they have chosen 5 contemporary artists, and they've made specific products that they're selling in the store. And I think that's the kind of collaboration which is really kind of perfect, because it's good marketing for Shanghai Tang. They're introducing their 2006 spring line based on Chinese art, and it's good exposure for both collectors and artists, because artists get to produce an item at a lower price, of a very good image, and collectors who maybe were bulking at higher prices can buy a piece of you know, very fine limited art edition for, say, you know, a couple $1,000s. So I mean, I think that's a really legitimate way to do it, and I agree that as an entry space, there's nothing wrong with showing in a shopping mall, or I certainly showed my first show at the Fringe. But I guess I kind of am wary sometimes of the way art is used to, I mean, it's used as an excuse rather than as an end product. And it seems to me like there are a lot of people who talk about an interest in art, but really they're talking about an interest in foot traffic. And I would rather talk about the art than sort of pretending about the art.
Yeah, Vinci. Coming back to these big Christie's and Sotheby's who now followed suit, to these huge exhibitions you stage by now in Hong Kong, and which are by now probably the most important contemporary Asian art exhibitions we have here every year. How important are these actual exhibitions in Hong Kong, and do you think they are service only to your client or also to the Hong Kong public or environment? So how responsible do you feel for Hong Kong actually?
Yeah. Actually, Christie moved to Convention Center by the early 2005, And at that time, we introduced the sale of Asian contemporary art. So we are not only introduced Chinese artists, instead we introduce more wild region like Korean, Japanese, and even now today it's Indian. So as for my feedback and feeling of the people who attend the viewings, and it's definitely actually it's not only the auction viewings, it's actually adding the value to the viewing because actually it seems to be like exhibitions. You can see, in that place you can see many artists' work from different regions, and you can see and know more about it. And actually, Christy actually doing a gallery talk in the viewing days. So the specialists were touring the viewers to speak a little by each. So people by seeing the viewings, actually people know better by different artists what their art is about, and actually it's very good for public as well because actually auction viewing doesn't limit it or invite. You have to show the invitation card. Everybody could go and you can go and check out whether you like, or it's like going to the museum to see the show. So I think definitely the auction viewing in Hong Kong do serve a great help, like people in Hong Kong particular, to know better about art and also different type of art. Yes, so that's what I feel so far.
We had, I mean, in Europe we had that idea, or especially actually it is done in a few countries, because a lot of artists sold works very cheaply, and then after 5-10 years these works get exploding prices, that actually that not only the seller profits from that, but also that the artists would get a certain percentage of the selling price, of the auction price. Also works with gallerists, right? If Johnson would secondary sell some big artists, the artist would actually get, I don't know, 5% or something like that. It's very controversial in Europe, and it took years for certain countries to actually do it, and a lot of countries didn't do it because they know that the auction houses then went back to London. In the EU, only London is not doing it, or England is not giving that percentage back to the artist because Christie's and Sotheby's are there certainly. But is that a way actually to have the artists participate at the booming market, or is it just a strange idea some people came up with?
Do you want me to? I mean, so I'm born in third generation from this part of the world. To me, it just sounds like a European tax. So, and that's why despite my British accent, I'm not. I don't know England very well, but it sounds like incidentally, Christie's and Sotheby's are not owned by English people, as you know. They're both owned by Frenchmen. So again, and maybe that explains also why 500,000 French people live in London. Tax, for example. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure the gallery. Maybe you can answer the question of whether gallery owners would actually benefit by having a percentage, because it's sort of a tax, and therefore wouldn't it decrease your volume of business?
I must say I've never thought about it.
Now's your chance.
Usually the beneficiary of exploding prices first of all the collectors. Galleries only would benefit from it if the galleries themselves are collectors as well. So in a very bullish market, apart from the collectors who already own the goods, I suppose the artists benefit from having the value of their new work raised to a different level. So, this is a thought. I don't know what is in it for the gallerists.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So, do you think artists being rich is a good idea, or do they paint better when they're poor?
Rich artists paint rich paintings. It's just a different type of art. But whether it's auctions or gallery exhibitions or even exhibitions in shopping malls, if you look at it from the angle of this talk tonight of the art market, all these efforts are efforts in adding value to the artwork, apart from, of course, letting more people know about the artwork. So if our concern is Hong Kong art, what we should really think about is how Hong Kong art can play into this different, all these different ways of adding value to it. Caroline doesn't want value of her artwork to be accrued through the shopping mall. But if a shopping mall of galleries, maybe it is a different matter. But at the end of the day, apart from being a commodity for trade, the reason people collect art is because they think there's a little bit more to it. They think there's a cultural value. They think there's some deep significance. They think there is something that to make you happy. There's something special in these objects. So the value added, the added value does not always just come from the exhibitions, and that's why I think interpretation and creative curatorial work is probably the most important aspect of promoting art. And what Hong Kong art suffers from is a lack of interpreters. People don't write about Hong Kong art history. So the greatest artists, Chinese artists, can live in Hong Kong. They will be missed out. They miss out art histories written in China. They miss out art histories written in Taiwan. So this is really one of the main reasons that Hong Kong art does not achieve the same sort of value. And perhaps one thing that we really should think about in terms of interpretation is that Hong Kong's rich. Let's buy some intellectuals and have them write books about Hong Kong art. We pay for critics to write about Hong Kong. We engineer all that. Why not?
Oh, there's a question. Do you want some? Do you want some mic? Oh.
Actually, I want to say something as a struggling Hong Kong artist.
A very rich, struggling artist.
Actually, I'm very grateful that Henry took me under his umbrella. And actually grateful that one of the Hong Kong Museum actually wanted to buy a piece of my work, and which is great news. But then the bad news is they just slam our price, almost cut it by half. And the argument is if they went straight to an artist, they don't need to pay the gallery's commission. And I think as you know, if we were really to promote Hong Kong's artists, I think the government probably need to take a lead in this and really, treat us better. I think we're really second rate compared to mainland artists by a far stretch.
Would you like me to?
Sure, but Dominic, do you want to come up? I'm here.
It's fine, no problem. I hear what you say. As a collector, of course, I can't agree with you very much. But there are two comments I would have about government intervention in the arts. The French government, sorry to talk about France, such a wonderful country, but their politics is so complicated, and I'm not sure if anyone knows the results of the 1789 revolution yet. But France is a country which, where the involvement of government directly into the art scene began in the early 80s, and where take an example of the UK again. Sorry to. But there's always been compared, so let's keep it simple. And where the UK government got out of funding the arts in the early 80s. And the result in France is that there are really very, very few decent contemporary artists today. Daniel Buren, maybe, if you've ever heard of him. He's not so young anymore anyway. And as a result, the architecture did very well in France because big monuments were built to people like Mitterrand and others. The art scene in the UK has been dramatic as as I think you probably all know, because they were, not supported by the government. So I think, this question about government and asking them to help you is, you might want to think about that one very carefully, given historical precedent. On the question of getting higher prices for your art from the museum, and if you've done it through a gallery, I suggest you go back to the gallery and negotiate their fees. That's what I would do if I was you. So that's the best advice I can give you, and then maybe you won't starve quite as much.
The thing is, I sold the same thing to private collectors who pay more than the government would.
So don't sell to the government.
Yeah, maybe take William's lead to open that a little bit to the, not a little bit, a big bit, to the audience. We can go on here, but are there questions at the moment from the, would you like, maybe have,
Johnson, you can charge me
Just to
extra
that,
when you sell me something.
Discussion, I just want to reiterate that, in fact, in Hong Kong, you can't separate the government from the museums, because the government is the museums and the museums of the government, that's a problem. So when someone says that they wish the government would pay more, what they actually mean is the museums should pay a fair price. And until there are privately funded museums or quasi-privately funded museums, there's no other question of it. It's a different problem.
Well, I think this is the biggest issue we have today in Hong Kong. We're the only major city. Sorry, Hong Kong is sadly the only major city in the world that doesn't have a reasonable building or structure in which a decent collection can be housed. Sadly, I mean, I'm probably throwing the cat among the pigeons, but when you see Bilbao appearing with a rather spectacular building and what's inside it is interesting and so on. You kind of think to yourself, well, maybe we should have a bunch of terrorists as well. We might get a nice museum at the end of the Civil War. But I think this is the biggest single layer that is missing in Hong Kong. We've talked about the layering and all that. It's very, very sad that West Kowloon didn't go ahead with or without property developers. I think that's a pity. It's missing. So you're completely right.
maybe we leave that microphone.
Hi, I'm from Friends of the Art Museum, Chinese University, Hong Kong. We're a voluntary organisation. We run sorry, not very loud. We run a monthly thing where we visit different galleries. One thing that we picked up as we go around different galleries each month is a story that's probably as old as you say, going back to the Medicis, and artists who they've had for many years, either jump into other galleries or more often now, selling their works direct. And that's where things have, the modern world now has changed from centuries ago, in that it is much easier for artists to sell direct. And just as a sort of flip side to the introduction at the beginning of this talk today, I noticed from your sheet you're commenting on the number of new galleries opening. Could it possibly be that the role of the galleries in Hong Kong and elsewhere will shrink inevitably as artists, established and not so established, will increasingly sell their works direct?
The galleries and if you take the number of galleries in Europe or in America, I think it tripled in the last 10 years. The number of galleries in the Western world tripled, I think, in the last 10 years. That's better? Oh, that one is, that's better. Hello? No, that's not. Oh, that's it, yeah. No, the number of galleries tripled in the last 10 years, and galleries are not only there to sell things, they're also there to promote it. They're the song for the galleries. No, they're also incredibly good to search artists, to help artists develop, and in this world where also the number of artists really tenfolds almost. We just had another art school opening here a few months ago. We do need the expertise of galleries not only to to sell, but also to promote, to publish, to help to search for the archives. And I can only talk about Europe and New Zealand, where I worked in the last years. Without galleries, there is just no chance for an art market, no chance for museums, and basically it is very, very difficult to have an artist community sustainable without commercial and non-commercial galleries. Where should people see the art?
In answering to your questions, I think I think especially in Hong Kong, this is a big problem because Hong Kong is such a small place, and artists are very easy to go direct. And I think with my with some of the older artists that I work with, they tend to really want to go direct. We do one show for them, and then they just say, okay, it doesn't work, and then they take all their works back, after 3 weeks. I think, for the new artists, I think is a little bit easier because we can educate them. We can tell them, the role of the galleries is important because if you don't have a gallery, if the gallery doesn't promote you, your prices will be the same 10 years, 20 years from now. You can keep on, of course, selling direct. But I think what a good gallery does is to help you increase the value of your work. So I think is one thing is about education is for the gallery to define their role, to really tell the artists what they do and what they can do. And also I think for the artists, I think most of the young artists that I work with, they don't want to deal with the commercial side of it because they don't want to go when people they don't want to negotiate the price with the clients. They don't know how to. They feel embarrassed. I think those are more kind of a personal issues. So I think I don't worry so much that I think artists go direct. I think more important, I think for me to tell them what we can do for them and make them understand that if the relationship is good and we are working, we are succeeding in both promotion and sales, then why there's no need, I think, for you to go direct. So for me, I think some of the artists that I work with, the best ones, they are the one that without a contract. In fact, I think the best contract is no contract in this case.
Pamela?
I was just thinking that there's one thing that's been missing out of the infrastructure equation is the paucity of artist studio spaces in Hong Kong. Nobody's really talked about encouraging young emerging talent and where do they actually go to make their work. This has become more apparent to me the longer I'm in Hong Kong. We're talking about museums and galleries, but we're not talking about artist spaces. And these are really vital if we want to really encourage people to talk about art, for collectors, for curators to go to visit studios. This year, for the first time, I've taken over from Claire Sue as an external examiner for the Hong Kong A-level students. And this weekend, I interviewed 30 young people from local schools. I saw some incredible talent. 6 of them are going to go to become accountants, social workers, study European politics, because nobody believes that they're doing anything worthwhile. Even their parents don't encourage them because they say being an artist is not going to get you any money, not going to get you a job, not going to get you shown in a gallery. I was so disappointed and frustrated that I'm being told a young woman wants to go to be an artist, which is probably going to be the biggest fashion designer since we've had, I don't know, who else? But I'm just saying it's a real shame that they aren't encouraged.
Leaving Julie's going to tank when the market hits the scale. Can we short the market? Is there any way of shorting it? Wang Yi probably will continue to do
I
that.
remember when I lived in
Don't you
Europe,
think?
to go into a gallery in London or Paris or New York,
Wang Yi will continue
wear
to do
my fur
well
coat and my
long
tiara
term,
and
but
be comfortable.
Li Minzhong,
And I think people should go
if he does
in
well,
and they should
I'll
really
leave my glasses.
enjoy the artwork, irrespective if they can afford it or not. Because it trains you and it helps to enjoy something that should be there for everybody.
Yes, I have a simple question because we are talking about Hong Kong market. Because there is some gallery here, Christie's, What is the proportion of your client or collector really in Hong Kong? In Christie sales, is there, what is the proportion of Hong Kong residents who buy art here?
So I don't think that.
It's okay.
I think that's it.
Okay, it's very far. Okay. In Christie sales, can
Oh, we
you
just
here?
take that
Okay.
one, I guess.
It's the only one that works. Just undo it.
No. That's the missing link. Okay, guys. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. In Christie Hong Kong sale, actually the structure of buyer are really balancing different regions, not only in Asia, Europe, American, or Mid East. But if you're talking about Hong Kong resident who buying art, actually we moved the sale from Taipei to Hong Kong by year 2002. And at that time, the Hong Kong resident buyer was like less than 10% in the total sale. But until last sale, 2005 November, actually the Hong Kong resident buyers are increased to more than 35%. So we can see how strong interest increase. It doesn't mean like the people in Hong Kong is not interested in art. It just actually doesn't have like really great place or auction to really show an excellent piece. So Hong Kong is definitely the center we feel for Christie's. It's the center for Asian art. Yeah.
I would like to ask the same question to Johnson actually. How much is of your sales is actually Hong Kong based, or how much of your customers come from locally, and how much?
Well, most of my clients are residents of Hong Kong, although many of them are not local Chinese. They may be business people who have been here for a few years, and they may be here only on a short term. But the type of art I show very often are artists who have just started up, and that type of the kind of people who collect new artists are very often more experienced collectors. So for collectors of the artists who are more the new artists, let's see. I haven't done my arithmetic. I think there must be like 50-50 for the new artists. Whereas the more established artists, then I get more and more local collectors.
Because the numbers I heard, the numbers I hear like out of Beijing, but this is one or two galleries. I said 90% of sales go actually overseas to America and Europe, but that's maybe one special Beijing case. Oh, wait, is that another number with you? Sorry,
yeah. Well, I think it's probably similar to Johnson's number, but I think probably in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a growing local Chinese collector base, which is a good sign. I think, especially the younger, maybe between 30 to 50 years old. I think those are becoming, I think, stronger. So I mean, since I only carry Hong Kong artists, so I tend to have more local Hong Kong Chinese. But one surprising thing is that I have almost 0 mainland Chinese buyer. So again, it's very strange.
And maybe that's also the time to introduce Dominic, who was a bit late. I'm sorry. Dominic Kran's art statement, which is a gallery which has a lot of international artists, one of the few galleries in town that represent a big number of non-Chinese artists here. He also does a lot of exhibitions actually in shopping malls, or does parties, those things we were talking on before. But again, how open are the local public to international art?
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Okay, good.
I apologize first for being late. Actually, it seems very difficult in Hong Kong to choose an African artist. And I was stuck in the gallery trying to get a flight and a visa for an African artist who will hopefully come tomorrow. Let's hope it. Yeah, on my front, I don't have many Asian artists. I will have more because I represent international artists, and obviously Asian are part of it. It's just that I did the program of the gallery before coming here, and so I have more Westerners, but that will type of equal after a while. But on my side, for type of cutting edge Western contemporary art, I have more local. I don't have any mainland Chinese buying in my gallery, but actually I have more Hong Kong Chinese than Westerners buying Western contemporary art.
How open is the local market to foreign artists?
Depend how do you find the local market?
The Hong Kong market. So for a foreigner, some of the artists that you have in your gallery, how open is the market for buying foreign art as opposed to local Hong Kong artists? I mean, just to put the reverse from what everyone else has been discussing so far, just to put.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's on my side. I don't think there's a homogeneous art market in Hong Kong. I think there's a lot of cycles revolving maybe around galleries or other places. So some people may actually collect only Chinese art, and some people may not collect only Western art. But I mean, so I mean, it's open as everywhere else. It's just an education to it.
Do you see that there's a lot of opportunities open for foreign artists coming to Hong Kong?
Opportunities if Hong Kong is not really linked to the rest of the global art market, so it's type of a dead end in a way for an artist. So I have a lot of artists coming to the gallery and trying to show their work to me, and wondering if they could be shown in the gallery. It's not the way actually I operate, but I mean, when I choose myself artists from abroad, or actually from Hong Kong, it's to promote them on a broader scope. And it's actually artists who are already established abroad, and therefore Hong Kong is one next stop in a way, and they can be excited to be shown in Hong Kong because they are not really exposed to Asia, etc. But for Western artists actually who from themselves come to a gallery in Hong Kong and try to be shown, to be exhibited, I always ask them, I mean, why do they come to Hong Kong? Why do they want Hong Kong? Because again, it's type of a dead end somehow. So as a gallery owner side, for me it makes sense because I'm promoting artists as a broad basis, and the show in the gallery is a starting point. But for an artist coming, a Western artist coming to Hong Kong, I think this artist has really to ask himself or herself, why, and to understand actually the local scene.
Can I help my panelists down here with a story, a true story? About a year and a half or 2 years ago, I got a call from Vinci's competitor, and they said, look, we know you're pretty serious about your contemporary Western stuff, your collection, and you bought a lot of stuff from us and from other people. So we're bringing a couple of people are coming to Hong Kong and they'd like to invite you for lunch. So I said, okay, fine, delighted. And they booked a table at a restaurant, and I turned up, and it was a rather small table, and the two people were there, I'm sure remain nameless, very nice, and top people from your competitor in London. And I looked around and I said, is there anyone else coming? She said, well, we could only find 2 collectors of serious collectors of Western contemporary art in Hong Kong. So I thought, oh, fine, I didn't ask. And you would not believe the shock I got when my wife sat down next to me. Does that answer your question?
Just on the subject of who collects Western art, who collects Chinese art, we show sculpture in glass from international group artists, predominantly American, and now starting with Chinese sculpture in glass. And we found that the interest for Western art, Western sculpture, comes from Chinese people, whereas the interest in Chinese sculpture comes from Westerners. So Don't know. Just food for thought.
Sorry, I should have added one other thing. I think the interesting question is about the mainland collectors, whether they will start buying their own contemporary artists seriously. That's, you know, going to be very interesting. I think they will, but I think that's already happening. But well, I don't know. Are they really starting? But you know, that's an interesting question.
Maybe 3 notes. For me, fascinating to be here. I was born in Soviet Union, and I'm Soviet artist, was Soviet artist. So in 1988, when Soviet Union opened doors, it was Sotheby and Christie, huge sale of Soviet art. People sell art for $560,000. People was amazed. Artists went to market to New York, London, sell Russian art. Nobody buy Russian art anymore. So I think mainly in China right now going through the same type of volcano effect. People was hungry, artists cannot sell their art, right now they selling art. But my biggest question is actually gallery. Gallery is the biggest window for people to see art. Gallery make decision what to show, what to not. So in Hong Kong, we see a lot of galleries here. We came from Alaska right now. We live in Alaska, we come here, we working here and living here. Gallery showing art here, basically very commercial art for sale. And gallery is a financial institution. Gallery must make money to sell art. So my question is, who makes decision in United States, money or customer, artist or gallery, what to show? And it's the biggest discussion, how gallery choose artists, like you choose young artists in Hong Kong.
Read the book, Colors.
How many artists in Hong Kong? How young artist can show his art, who will make decision? I think it's the biggest problem. And as soon as you will show young artists become more looking forward to make art, to make money, because as you point, artists must make living, they need to eat. So in order to be accounted, how gallery work with artists to promote it? Because I really don't see, it's a big question, what is gallery doing and how many galleries to promote real art, not commercial art? So I think the question is again, how gallery promote real art, not commercial art?
But buy a book called Colors, it tells you all about it. It tells you everything about how the art market works, the promotion.
And I understand this, but
it's about 150 pages long. But I'm serious, it tells you and explains it. It's a long story.
I understand.
I think it's a very good point though, versus commercialism, versus young emerging artists that really don't get any support or recognition from the gallery system. The overheads are so high in Hong Kong for galleries, they have to sell affordable art, but somebody who's coming out of a school or out of an institution or even self-made really needs to know how to take their portfolio around. Dominic's just saying he doesn't really go into the idea of somebody unsoliciting him to put his work in or her work in the gallery. So what could we give some advice as what we could do?
Ooh.
There you go.
That would make the price go up.
I mean,
no,
that's the question too.
It's a business or it's art?
No, actually this, what people should understand probably on the gallery side is that you have exhibitions and you may not necessarily actually make money out of the exhibitions. You can make money actually on the dealing side. I think galleries do a lot of dealing beside the exhibition. So what you see in the gallery is not necessarily actually what the gallery sell. Yeah. I mean, I'm doing a lot of outsourcing. I'm selling a lot of Chinese art actually, outsourcing a lot of Chinese art for clients who tell me we may like what you show, but we, for speculative reason or other reason, we want to buy Chinese art now. And I'm not just sitting here and waiting that I have a Chinese artist on display with an exhibition. I will outsource that. So that allow actually, I think, all the dealing, everything that people don't see behind the scene, allow gallery to do proper so-called non-commercial exhibitions. And if things goes well, I guess you can still sell during exhibitions and still do, I mean, have compromise, have quality art, non-so-called commercial, but sellable. But really, galleries have a lot of dealing activities of behind the scene. So you can contribute. I think for me, exhibitions really a contribution to the city. I mean, to the community. For young artists, it's for me it's more a question of maturity in the art than being commercial, non-commercial. It's to be young and reach a certain maturity to be able to have exhibition with galleries who have artists who have reached already a certain maturity because maybe they live from the art or they, for whatever different background they may have, and then it's very difficult to show a young artist who may lack a certain maturity, not only on the concept, but maybe on the realization of the concept.
Yeah. Well, and also I can actually locally, there are about 50 to 60 arts graduates every year from the university art school here, and I do 8 exhibitions a year, mostly solo shows. So every year I try, I mean there are many artists that come to me and ask for representations. So of course I have to choose. And I agree with, I mean, what Dominic's saying. If I try to balance my budget simply by doing 8 shows of young artists, there's no way. So in fact, I think, no, in fact, I think, you know, of all the exhibitions that I do, maybe, if I'm lucky, 50% of the show I will make money, make a profit out of it. So there's a lot of dealings underneath, and I use those dealings not necessarily, you know, with Hong Kong artists, but also from areas that from collectors that I know, basically, you know, maybe through the auction, through a private secondary market dealership. I mean, I use that profit to subsidize the exhibitions. But there's no way that you can really, you know, select or take in all 50 artists. I have to choose. I have to make the tough decisions. And I go to the shows, you know, they come to me, referred by friends. I have many of those artists coming to me every day. So again, you know, some of them I tell them perhaps it's not ready yet, but I would say, you know, out of the 8 exhibitions every year, maybe 3 of them are very risky, quote unquote, that I don't expect any profits at all. But you know, I see the potential there. For example, conceptual art in Hong Kong, very difficult to sell, but yet, you know, I think it's necessary to have such a representation for both the gallery and the artist as well. So, you know, the image of the gallery is more complete, while the artist can have some encouragement. End up losing money, especially when you publish catalogs. So again, you know, those are really, I think, a lot of people don't understand. You know, galleries do a lot of private dealings in order to subsidize the contemporary exhibitions, especially with younger artists. It's almost impossible to make money sometimes.
Can I just pose a question to Tobias?
Oh.
Since Parasite is, you know, has a history of being a Hong Kong artist space nonprofit, can you sort of talk about that situation and how you see it right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Parasite started out as an artist space. Parasite started out 10 years ago as an artist space. And if you look through the publications, a lot of the exhibitions Parasite did was actually showing the artists themselves and friends they had, and the wider circle, which is absolutely fabulous and should be like that, because there was no other place for representation for these artists. Luckily, a lot of these artists became appreciated and became known, and some of them even have galleries today, and most of them have professorships and jobs and make a quite decent living. The Parasite nowadays developed into, as we know, a more curator-run space, and they hired me as an outside curator, and actually what Johnson said, basically I'm hired here to promote Hong Kong art, not only in Hong Kong, but also overseas, also internationally. And because Parasite, the artist that still runs this, or that still are on this board, decided that it is time for Hong Kong art to, on the one side, to have a better selection, maybe a more objective or other subjective selection, but also to find somebody who can promote them on the overseas level, and that's what we do. We show less Hong Kong artists than we did before. We show some more international at the moment, but we do on the other side show a lot of Hong Kong artists internationally at the moment, which certainly in Hong Kong not a lot of people realize, but we believe that this is one of our main missions at the moment. From that place on, but also we are very aware that we are not only, I mean, we always say, yes, we are non-commercial, we are non-profit and so on, but also we are running an art auction, as most of the artists in the room here know, and some other institutions also run art auctions. It's actually a question we could put back on the gallerist. How bad or good are these art auctions for the local market? Because with these art auctions, we certainly participate and profit from the local art market. Unfortunately, these auctions are necessary, otherwise I wouldn't sit here and we couldn't survive. But so we are not totally non-profit, and we also have to satisfy the government, otherwise they wouldn't give us money. And I think it would be an utopian to say we are totally non-profit, non-detached to anything. But on the other side, we can and we do show a lot of things. Instead of, like, Henry can do 3 shows a year which are non-profit, I mean, we can do 8 shows every year which we don't have to sell anything. We can be a bit more adventurous, and we can put money in projectors, and we can put money in televisions. I mean, at the Hong Kong Biennial, the artists had to bring their own televisions to the show, otherwise they couldn't show at the museum. I mean, we are in the lucky situations where we can actually provide the televisions and projectors. So that's a bit, maybe a bit more lucky.
And also, I mean, I of course, I don't intend those shows to be non-profit.
Oh yeah.
Oftentimes it turns out to be, but.
Yeah, but isn't it like that the ones you think will be non-profit are profit?
Well, of course, I would never label it.
Okay. Yes, but at the moment, as I said, we give art away for free, which is something new in the country. So let's see how that works. Any other questions at the moment? Oh yeah. There's Alice.
Maybe just leave it on. Leave it on. Leave it on.
Leave it on. Leave it on. Don't touch it.
I just wanted to go back to this gentleman's comments about the Soviet art market not the art market, but the market in terms of Sotheby's Christie's sales for Soviet art, and the huge amount of interest that there was when the Soviet Union did open up and the art became known. And I thought about that a lot, and I think others have as well, about the parallels there. You know, this huge bubble, this huge explosion of critical interest, collectors buying and then put. But I think that one of the major differences which exists in the Chinese context is that in the Soviet Union at the time you did not have a local market, local collectors, and that's very important to support that. But, yes, exactly, and people just weren't collecting their own art. Whereas I think in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, it's been a very different situation. And the other thing we have to remember is that modern Chinese art is also only relatively recently being collected on a large scale, and I'm talking about 20th century. So collectors used to collect classical paintings, traditional art, and except for a couple of big names like Zhang Dachen or whatever, there really wasn't that much of a market. Even the museums didn't have collections. This is all really in the past 15 years. So it's curious that contemporary and modern art kind of began to be collected at the same time. So it's a very odd situation, and so there are differences.
Yeah, maybe one more question before we wrap that up. Anybody wants to do the last one?
How do you guys encourage, I mean, just piggybacking off Valerie's question, how do you encourage new collectors? How do you show them that there's, for people that aren't used to maybe looking for this magic, people who have some money, but aren't used to, the gallery scene, aren't used to going out and looking at art? How do you encourage them? How do you do it, both from the gallery side, from the dealer side, from the museum side, and from the public art side? What do you think is the best way to kind of stir that?
Give them food. Never you have that food at your opening.
You're talking about stimulation.
Sometimes it helps.
In all aspects.
I'm mostly thinking about like new collectors. I mean, there are people there that see it, want it, and feel it. But how do you build that? I mean, it's as important as obviously as the artists were creating it.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. I think collecting anything is a process of sort of taking a personal interest and starting to learn a little about the sector, whatever it is you're looking at, whether it's paintings or fast cars or any of these things. I think the second thing is to understand, as well as, if you can, what we've been discussing tonight about the layering of the galleries, how each of the promotional aspects operates. And perhaps the third thing is actually, having sort of being prepared to hold on and to like something and just really falling in love with the whole aspect of collecting paintings, because it's not something that comes very easily or very naturally.
You teach someone how to love.
And yeah, it just sort of happens. And you sort of start buying one or two paintings and you don't pay very much, you make terrible mistakes. The first artwork that I bought was because my wife is half Swiss, she's half Swiss, half Chinese, but I thought, I better buy a bit of Swiss art. Never again. She didn't like it. I was on the phone at 4 in the morning to some auction trying to buy this thing, and it was all wrong, absolutely all wrong. And we still have the piece. I've tried desperately to offload it, but just, So this is a very good reminder, if you like, on the commercial side. And the minute I'd done that, I realized, okay, this is wrong. Forget about the investment. This is not about making money or buying and selling or trading or any of this stuff. That's for these kind of guys to do, and these intermediaries and so on. So I was lucky in that I blew, the wrong money at the wrong time for the wrong thing. So it was perfect. So I sort of, had the bad experience early on, and then from then on, I just sort of got interested and learned, and I had some advantages. My mother's an artist and local Hong Kong artist. Although I haven't bought any Hong Kong artists at all, I have to be honest.
Maybe you should start.
Yes, I probably should. And again, you buy what you like or what your generation represents. Or maybe you buy art by people who went to school with you. And I think the generational thing is very important. If you look at things like the Warhol Index, for those who are really commercial, there's a Warhol Index. You can see that the rise and drop in the prices is related to demographics and the generation that grew up with Warhol and how their stock portfolios went and so on. So if you like, I think each generation, and we haven't talked about this very much, but I think the generation in Hong Kong of people between 35 and 45, sort of what we've talked about, that age group is going to and will continue to collect Hong Kong art. Why? Because those artists in that age, they either know them or have met them or feel affinity to them, or the message the painting is giving, or whatever it is. And so if you feel some affinity to the subject matter, then you will start to have some love and care and interest in what you see. And it sort of just takes itself on, and you spend more money and you have more trouble from your wife, and it just sort of, it becomes fun and interesting, and then the whole commercial part disappears, and you sort of occasionally think about selling something because these crazy prices, and then you say, well, it's going to crash anyway in that market, and maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, and then you buy more when it does. So you just sort of end up, if you like collecting, you end up just having more and more paintings. And I think the more people who collect art, the better it is for the artists. It's good for painters, young painters. I think it's extremely important that we all encourage young people to start painting, whether it's Hong Kong or anywhere else. I think it's very bad to have the wrong type of money going into the art world, and I've already mentioned what I personally think doesn't help. But I think the more promotion you can have, and the more people collect and make mistakes, and we're all human. So I think all of that comes with it. It's a mysterious world. It's it's difficult.
And also, I think from a gallery's perspective, back to your question, how do we encourage the collectors to buy like something like maybe contemporary Chinese? I think one thing is that it's so difficult for collectors to switch direction 180 degrees totally. So I think as a gallery, you have to know what your collectors been collecting, what they like, because at the end of the day, it's much easier to try to find things for them to buy comparing to try to sell them anything. So.
I would. Sorry, just one very last small thing. I would completely agree with that. We've bought a few of the contemporary Chinese artists very early. In fact, before the sale in '95, there was another sale, which was much sort of more low key in the Shangri-La basement, and just sort of dabbling just to see what it's like. So I'd encourage anybody to buy a few paintings, one or two. Don't spend too much money. Just see how So even though we've been collecting Western contemporary for a long time, I think that Chinese contemporary artists in Hong Kong or mainland, I don't know why we're differentiating. It's all the same. I think it's very interesting, and I think there will be there'll be a flight to quality, and the really great artists will come out soon. But I just don't know, honestly. I'm not quite sure what I like yet, so I just bought a few and stuffed them on the walls in a couple of the places we have. And in a few years I'll see whether it's still, and if it's still good, So that's how it works.
Yeah, with these very encouraging words, I thank everybody on the panel. I thank everybody who came here tonight to the Goethe Institute. I thank the Goethe Institute for giving us that great space. The next great, wonderful talk here is in 1 week. David Elliott from the Morin Museum, one of the most known and most interesting curators out there. I'm very much looking forward to it, and together with the Asia Art Archive. And thanks everybody. I think we have some wine, some beer, if somebody is interested to have a small talk to any of us. Maybe stay another few minutes if possible. Thanks for coming, and hope to see you all again soon. Bye bye.
Maybe